Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody. You know, you gotta give me energy. You know, I'm from the Bronx. You know, the home of hip hop, salsa. You know, we get it going at all times. So you got to be ready right now. My name is Michael Blake. I'm the incoming Assemblyman of the 79th District in the Bronx, New York. Thank you. Now, and this is a topic that is near and dear to us, obviously, and very near and dear to me. I had the incredible opportunity of working at the White House under President Obama, where I directed minority business outreach for 2.5 years and African American outreach and state and local outreach as well. So this is a very personal subject matter for us in that manner. And so the title is just Economic Development MWBEs because we intentionally are going to make this more of a conversation rather than a one-way dialogue, which folks have too often when they come to these workshops itself in that manner. Allow me very briefly just to let folks know the panelists, even though you see their names listed here: the Honorable Luis Daniel Rivera Filomeno, Puerto Rico Senator and President of Commission of Labor Relations, Consumers Affairs, and Employment Creation. Augustine Karanja, you know, I got a little extra on there right there. You know, we're feeling good right now. We got, say it again. It's Karanja. Why do they always put it the backwards? Why do they do that? Why do they got it listed the wrong way? A little flavor right there. I'm looking down and I'm like, wait a minute, that don't look right now when I'm looking at this. Karanja gonna make sure I get that later on. Associate Counsel of the Empire State Development, Edward Pichardo, Esquire of Counsel, Meyer, Suozzi, English, and Klein. Ed Murphy, Executive Director of Workforce Development Institute, AFL-CIO, and Michael Garner, Chief Diversity Officer, MTA. Please give them a round of applause. So here's what we have agreed to. Each of the panelists are only going to do 5 to 7 minutes tops, and specifically talk through what do they see as the primary challenge or challenges for MWBEs. You know, we've talked through the data and the opportunities. People of color are going to be the majority by 2043. You know, babies of color being born at a higher rate than white babies right now in the country, starting in Texas. The growth opportunity. We've talked through the data. We talked through access to capital, access to contracting. Now we want to be more practical in these conversations in a very tangible way where we're moving this ball forward. So what are the challenges that you see? And then specific opportunities to remedy those challenges is what's going to be presented by our panelists. And then we're going to open this up for a conversation and how can we create an environment that is much more helpful and supportive for MWBEs across the country and across our state. Obviously, we've talked through the success that has happened in that manner, respectively. From Governor Cuomo discussing and saying we need to grow and get into the 30% MWBE goal, to the conversations from Comptroller Stringer and creating a report card. Need something? I'm a pastor. It's okay. We always have it. That's my phone. Don't take my phone now. To Comptroller DiNapoli, who has made it a point to make sure we're investing more in our assets and our funds into minority asset managers, et cetera. That's the opportunity that's being presented there. So allow me, if I might, let me just start to my right and start with our Chief Diversity Officer from MTA, Michael Garner, for his opening comments. Let's give him a round of applause, please. Come on up.
Afternoon. Great. Everybody's still at work after that long lunch next door, right? It's great. So listen, MWBE, historical issues that we've talked about, and I'm kind of tired of the historical issues and conversations that we have had. This is not brain surgery, right? So essentially, engaging MW and DBEs, there needs to be a commitment from the top. Fortunately, we have a governor who has just increased contract awards to our state certified firms from 20% to 30%, right? And the challenge that I see in that is that there's going to be a very, very short period of time in which, when everybody is utilizing our state certified firms and our DBEs, there's not going to be enough firms in the marketplace to support long-term goals. So what do? You basically have to take taxpayers' monies and not only ensure that those taxpayers' monies are being spent in a cost-effective manner, but in an inclusive manner. And when there's a shortage of MWDBE firms in the marketplace, you need to come up with solutions and strategies that will allow government to build a more robust pool of MWDBE firms. If you look at construction, there's always 4 areas: lack of access to capital, lack of access to bonding, lack of access to effective training, because each agency does things differently, so your training program must be tailor-made. And then breaking down larger contracts, which will allow your MWDB firms, who historically have been accustomed to working as subcontractors, to now bid to you directly as prime contractors, putting their destiny in their own hand, and focusing on bringing in outside resources and competent staff, and having the person who runs your MWDB programs report directly to the top with adequate resources and staff, and focus on solutions but not the historical problems. That's what we've done at the MTA. And in 7 years, we've increased contract awards from 6% to currently 22%, and we're going to 30%. And mind you, that 30% is going to be a floor and not a ceiling. And that's, Mike, on top of the 6% disabled veteran goals that we're going to start assigning on our contracts, right? And so the challenge is going to be to develop capacity in the marketplace, which will allow all the state agencies and the state authorities to develop a pool so we can satisfy the goals via prime contract opportunities or subcontract opportunities. And for those of us who are in New York City, the even bigger challenge is going to be when the mayor and the city of New York starts to focus on MWBE, we're going to be going after the same contractors. Because if you look at the cross-certification of MWBE firms, a large portion of those firms are also certified by the city of New York. So once the city agencies start opening up and start putting in programs, there's going to be a shortage of MW and DBE firms who can finish our projects safely, timely, and on budget. So I'm ending my brief presentation by saying that the key to all is to focus on the solutions, not the historical problems. Many times you hear agencies say, well, listen, we want to do X, Y, and Z, but we can't because we're in a violation of state law. And the simple response is change the state law. Find a sponsor in the state assembly, find a sponsor in the state senate, ensure that those bills are passed in both houses, and then your issues, your programs would then become state law. Thank you.
So we're going to come back on the development of capacity point. I saw a few heads starting to nod right there because I think we're all tired of being in a space where we're literally going after the exact same pool of folks, or hearing that I can't find somebody. That's always the joyous one that you always have to hear. Allow me briefly to pause to acknowledge 2 of our incredible assembly members who are here from the 85th District, Victor Pichardo, our assemblyman from the Bronx, and from the 87th, Louis Sepulveda. Always got love for Julian because he's wearing a Jets jersey. That makes me feel good. Even though the Jets are 1-8 and they're a disaster right now, I can get down with that right there. Always a good thing right there. Now, next up, Karanja, you want to come on up, please? Round of applause, please.
Thanks for having me. Thank you, Michael. You know, I could really bore everybody to tears with all the stuff that we're doing at ESD and in New York State to support MWBEs. I mean, basically from our perspective, what we want to do is, really do transformational change by using the purchase power of the state to not only give contracts to MWBEs with state work, but to really transform the private sector market as well. You're building capacity with those firms, then they're able to sort of get the things like the capital, the know-how, and then they can sort of branch out and really have a broad and far-reaching impact on our society. And that's why I do the work that I do at Empire State Development. Michael made reference to changing the laws. That's right in my wheelhouse. I would argue that the truth be told, what we got to do is implement the laws that we have. The truth is, when I was in the Senate, we passed very strong laws, and you sort of, when you're in the legislative process, you assume that you pass a law, something's going to happen, and you don't realize that you need a tremendous amount of political will. You need people who know what they're doing. And you need all kinds of things to come together in order to actually get things done. And so I can tell you that I am really proud of where we are in this state right now with the MWBE program. It's not perfect, and it's got a long way to go. But when I came to the administration in 2011 to now, it's like night and day in terms of what we're actually doing for MWBEs with respect to state work. So, I don't want to focus on the problems. I think at ESD, we certainly need to take the charge of certifying more firms. That's clear. And we have to help our sister agencies in having firms that can do the work. So there's capacity building that government certainly has a role in playing, and that's something that we're working on. I think that, to my mind, initially in the first 4 years of the administration, we had to clean up the program and sort of get it to what the law said it was supposed to be. And I think we're almost there. Phase 2 is really sort of doing the real work of economic development, of capacity building, of matching firms to work that they can do, letting them expand and grow. So to me, I just think that there's tremendous opportunity. And the fact that the governor has sort of doubled down and is now increasing the goal, I know that kind of, for a lot of our sister agencies, it makes them a little concerned because there's a tremendous amount of pressure from the governor's office for them to make their goals. But someone like me, it just makes me smile because what I know is that means if you have firms out there that can really do the work and they're ready and they're willing and they're able, they're probably going to get on those contracts. And that's, at the end of the day, the performance measures and all those other things notwithstanding, that's what it's about. It's about using that purchasing power to really have that transformational change. So I just want to talk about some of the things that we're doing right now at ESD. So we're doing things that are not sort of traditionally thought of at MWBE. Most of the time, people think about MWBE, you're thinking about contracting goals, subcontracting goals on large projects, principally construction projects. Actually, in our state law, it's all state contracts are subject to MWBE. And what we're trying to do now is really do more direct engagements to MWBEs rather than just being subcontractors. So in doing that, we're doing like a quantitative factor in the procurement law for MWBE status. So to put that in simple English, if you're a certified MWBE, you get more points when you're being scored. We're doing diversity practices, which gives large contractors points in the competitive procurement process for the work, for the past work they've done with MWBEs. And we're just trying to overall add to the rigor and strengthen the program in our agencies. And for those people who are here from those agencies, they'll tell you that the governor's office is very aggressive and very committed to making sure that the agencies are running the programs to the letter of the law and in the spirit of the law. I also want to highlight, since on the program it does talk about regulations, that we have a couple of new things in our regs that were just promulgated. We have the commercially useful function. We have enhanced reporting requirements for our agencies. And we also have the new disparity study that's coming out soon, and that's really important because, the whole thing goes legally from the legal predicate for the program, which is the disparity study. We have to have something that says, yes, the MWBEs are in the marketplace. Yes, there is a persistent evidence of discrimination. And yes, we can have this program to remediate that discrimination. So that's coming out in 2016, and I think it's something that we really need robust public input. And it's definitely something that folks want to be thinking about and understanding, particularly people in the legislative process, because what's going to happen is after the disparity study drops, there's going to be a change in the law. And because of the posture, I think, of the administration, I think you're going to see a lot of lobbying, both to weaken the law and strengthen the law. So I want to implore those of our elected officials to be aware of that in 2016, that law is going to be up for changing. Things like excluding classes of contracts, excluding agencies entirely. Those are going to be the things that are on the table. So it's something to definitely keep in mind. And I'll stop babbling and move on now.
One thing when we open it up that I'm going to ask for Karanja to dive into a little bit more is how do we ensure that MWBs are strong enough and ready for the opportunity? When you just say you're going to go from 20 to 30%, that means you have to find more. And one thing that we don't want to create is you bring in more MWBs who may not be ready for a project at scale, then they're not successful, then you create the environment where someone will see, I told you, they weren't ready for that opportunity. So would love to make sure we dive into that. Also want to pause to acknowledge another phenomenal elected official that has entered the room, our borough president from Manhattan, Gail Brewer, who's in the house. And now we're going to have, perfect, come on. Ed Murphy, why don't you come on up? Ed has a PowerPoint presentation. Round of applause for Ed, please.
If any of you were in the room when I got up this morning in the labor breakfast, I got up and I got down, and I'm going to try to do that as quickly as I can. So I'm going to flip through this PowerPoint, but I'm not really going to spend a lot of time on it. Anybody who sees something you might be interested in, give me a business card, I'll send it to you. Basically, the Workforce Development Institute is the nonprofit arm of the New York State AFL-CI. So we were developed about 10, 15 years ago. We get most of our money from New York State government, from the legislature, and we believe in the three-legged stool: business development, workforce development, and community development. And that's basically what we're about. We've been providing education training, economic development work for unions. Right now, last couple of years, we've been doing a lot more with businesses. In this year, we're giving away about $3 million to businesses, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And I'm going to talk more from the perspective of what we're doing in a concrete sense. I think one of the challenges for MWBE and economic development is lack of money, lack of skills, mentoring people, and having people like Michael and others on the inside who can navigate through and coach people through to that, because a lot of people really need that help to do things like that. Just kind of do an environmental scan. Basically, these slides about Hispanic participation or population and government and businesses, it really, the message I want to get across here is the Hispanic community is not just in New York City. It's expanding all over the state, and you need to have a state perspective. Places like Newburgh, which have like 40-some% in the Hispanic, are really important to be looking at. Other places like Orange County, and the cities around the state. We need to be ensuring that the Hispanic-owned businesses grow with the population of the state. A lot of people go for grants and it takes forever and you're frustrated. WDI, what we do, we have money, we have regional directors all over the state, and they work with the businesses, they work with the community, and they kind of coach through what's needed and help people get through that process very quickly. And we can turn the money around real fast if somebody like a helicopter company needs something, or agricultural problem, things like that. So we have this money, and we have people who can mentor and help. Our jobs, our money goes to businesses as well as to unions and nonprofits. We do work with the Native Americans. We do work with groups all over the state. And that flexibility of grants and people who can actually help and be the brokers and the intermediaries for people are really what's important. Manufacturing is increasing in New York State even more. There's the issue of onshoring. People went overseas to manufacture, and then they're coming back because the national security costs are significant overseas, and the transportation costs. Our grants are in 4 main areas. We do pre-employment training, we do incumbent worker training, business processes, lean manufacturing, and we help people with layoffs. The big issue I want to make is our money's flexible. We can go in, we can be responsive, we can broker with people. And as I said, we give money to businesses, nonprofits, and we're making incredible relationships with a lot of different people. And I think what's really I'd like to talk about is the Hispanic community. I think more and more needs people helping people get to where they need to go, and then staying with them once they get a job or they get a contract. There needs to be a lot more mentoring. We need people who are successful in New York City mentoring people in Orange County or Buffalo and things like that. And I would like to promote a statewide perspective rather than just a city perspective. I'd like to see us not turning small businesses upstate New York over to the chambers of commerce, because that's where they're getting their support, and they need that. They need to have the kind of camaraderie of ethnic, cultural groups and people that are helping each other. The important thing for the AFL-CI is that if we want to survive as a union movement, we have to have partnerships with businesses, and we need to have partnerships with the community. My job is to build an organization, which I did, and with a lot of people, a lot of support. Ed Pichardo, when he was in the Senate, was one of the key people who brought us money and brought us resources, and there needs to be a level of expertise. So I'd like to end with just saying the importance of knowing the customers, knowing the community, brokering the relationships between Hispanic businesses and other businesses, having people, like I say about Michael being inside the MTA, who can facilitate things happening and know how to get people along. Having people around who've made a paycheck and made a payroll and do that, it's really crucial. We've been broadening our perspective. It's been working very well for us in manufacturing and all. And the main message I have here is we have some resources. When we get to talk, I want to find ways to help, and that's why I'm here. I'm here every year and all these conferences, but I think that's basically what I want to leave you with, and make plenty of room for people to talk.
Ed, I'm just going to tee it up that when we open it up, I'm going to ask you to talk more about the life cycle. It's good for us to give someone an opportunity, but if we don't stay with them throughout, again, we're not creating a space for someone to be successful in that manner as well. And I'm coming up more questions along the way. Karanja, I got another one just to get you ready for. There's conversation, Mecca, I might have to pull you in too on this, of the legally binding conversation of a goal. I think there's the back and forth dialogue of, can a goal truly be legally binding? Because in its language, it's still a goal. So walking through how do you actually get there in that manner. Last but certainly not least, Ed Pichardo, please.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Ed Pichardo. I'm an attorney with the firm Meyer, Suozzi, English, and Klein. As was mentioned a little earlier, I was a program director for the Workforce and Economic Development team back in 2010 for the Senate. I worked on the legislation with Karanja. We're on the team together. I think this is a moment which is pregnant with possibilities, I would say. When we worked on the legislation, we tried to make it as constitutionally rigorous as possible so that it could survive any legal challenge that might come against it. It also created a very important position, which was the Chief Diversity Officer. And as you can see, it was an office that was also created for the New York City Comptroller's Office as well. And now it's yielded a report card in terms of the performance of New York City and procurement. So, when it comes to minority women-owned business enterprise programs, it's definitely received a good high profile. There are a lot of conferences taking place, discussions all over about it, and so the hope is that these programs continue to grow, they continue to get better. One of the things that I definitely want to say is that just following up with the theme of discussing the positive and not the negative. At the end of the day, these programs are a fulfillment of Dr. King's dream of economic justice. And so, that becomes an important topic of conversation because, there are times with the growth of these programs and the increase of the goal to 30%, people start asking, well, why do we have these programs? Are they necessary? And so then you have to get into a philosophical conversation about why these programs exist. And the disparity study that's coming up. I mean, there was some concerns that after Mayor Bloomberg's study with respect to the New York City program, some of the numbers, goal numbers went down, and people are clearly concerned about that. And then, you have the report card coming out as well. So when it comes to this area, while some of us may take it for granted that, these programs are necessary, we have to keep in mind that at the end of the day, implementing this level of economic justice can sometimes be challenging, and we have to be very careful about how we go about it, because sometimes if we go about it too quickly in a haphazard manner, you can end up finding yourself in a place where some court reviews the program and decides that, oh, this is unconstitutional and the like. You had a really bad decision come out, with the Supreme Court concerning admissions in Michigan, for instance, the Schuette case. And, that case wasn't just about, university admissions. This also touched upon procurement as well and race-based preference programs. So, these are the things to keep in mind. Another thing that I would like to mention was that I was at a very good, well-attended event a couple of months ago that was hosted at the Dominican Republic's consulate in Manhattan. And the consul general had members of his staff there from the government of the Dominican Republic. And it was a very good discussion about connecting, opportunities here in the United States, small businesses, to the Dominican Republic. And I think that's important because you have a growing Dominican community in the city and state of New York, as well as the rest of the Northeast. So, in terms of keeping with the theme of Somos, Futuro, and we're here talking about Latino empowerment, we also have to think about that connection in terms of, procurement here in the United States and procurement overseas as well, and international procurement. I guess I'd like to, end with that. I mean, I myself, I often give legal advice to some prime contractors and some MWBE businesses concerning kind of the legal aspects of the program, certification, decertification, what can and can't be done. And one of the major challenges that I see a lot of times, or that's brought to my attention by a lot of minority women-owned business enterprises in particular, is prompt payment. A lot of these businesses have a very hard time, even after they get the contract, keeping it and continuing to perform because, the compensation by the government can sometimes be a little slow. So, I think that's something that, definitely needs to be worked on. I heard a little earlier a discussion about, capitalizing minority and women-owned business enterprises so that they can not only perform but also grow as businesses and go from, say, a subcontractor to a prime contractor. So I think that's a more weightier and heavier conversation that, the stakeholders need to have in terms of supporting these businesses. So, I'll end my comments there, and I guess later on as this discussion continues, I'll add my 2 cents then. Thank you.
All right. So let's dive on in, and we're gonna make this there's a few immediate questions that we have here, and then we're gonna make this a more of a free-flowing dialogue in that manner. And we've got a good amount of time. We've got at least about 45 minutes here, so we can be able to go back and forth. Allow me also to now acknowledge our public advocate of the great city of New York, Tish James, who's in the room. And I think, Mike and I were both in the earlier session, but I think it's a testament of the attention that is happening around this conversation around MWBEs and economic development. There were, I think, about 6 electeds at the first session. We've had 5 in here today. We're clearly seeing an appreciation for the subject on today. So I have tough questions for each of you. That's my job. I'm going to enjoy this because I'm going to get ready for y'all to ask me tough questions in about a week. So, we're going to have some role reversal right now. And I'm going to throw it out there to each of you so you can think it through, and then however we want to dive on in. To Mike Garner. Mike Garner, what is the progress of the MTA Capital Program? How is that really moving forward? And why aren't more agencies doing what you're doing? We keep hearing about the success of MTA, but we don't really hear about other agencies. Yeah, I'm gonna put some folks on the spot right now. Data is out there. Now we got to figure out how we progress ahead. To Karanja, I mentioned this briefly earlier. Is a goal truly legally binding? A goal in its nature is an abstract term. The way the language was created was that the executive order made it mandatory for the team to be pulled together, but is a goal truly mandated, and how to gain access to those opportunities. To Ed Murphy, how do we truly prepare the workforce? We keep talking through these conversations around MWBEs and the opportunities itself, but what practically needs to happen to get folks ready? Section 3, which is on the books, where you have these development projects that are happening there, but we're not getting our communities truly ready to be aware of that. Certification that's not happening in our respective communities. And Ed Pichardo, 2 different questions. One, a few of us have started a dialogue around the Rooney Rule. For those who are not aware of the Rooney Rule, in the NFL, there was a rule that was established where the 3 finalists for head coaching positions, there has to at least be one person of color in those finalists. Why don't we have a Rooney Rule? And on our way, our procurement efforts are happening here. What do you think legally needs to be created to make that happen? And how do we create that structure? So questions for each. Michael, you want to start?
Great, testing. Okay. So our new 5-year capital plan is $33 billion. It was rejected without bias because we need to do a better job of ensuring and working with the chamber as to how that capital plan is going to be paid for. And so that's where those talks right now. But why is it important for the MWBEs to track, follow, and support our 5-year capital plan? Simple, it's jobs. For every $1 million that's spent in construction in our region, a total of 26 jobs are created or maintained, right? For far too long, we've been creating jobs at the top. When we allow contractors to seek and get goal waivers and reductions, that says that those jobs are being created at the top only. And so when we enforce our goals and we refuse to reduce or waive those goals, jobs are being created in the MWBE community as well. And that's what taxpayers' monies are meant to do, is not only be spent in a cost-effective manner, but be spent in an inclusive manner. And I'm not sure, but my staff will tell you, it is almost like a Herculean effort or an act of Congress for you to get a goal waiver at the MTA. The only way that you get a go waiver is that there is no availability of MWBE firms in those areas in which we are buying from. But we're also, our board now, before any contract is approved, they want to know, how did this contractor do with respect to their most recent project with respect to achieving their MWBE goals? And they're saying that if we are granting go waivers, because of the lack of firms in those areas, what are we doing in order to create capacity in those areas? So for example, we are the largest buyers of subway cars, rail cars, and buses in the country. They have access for go waivers. They got go waivers in the past, right? But they're not getting go waivers because we had separate conversations with the Chrysler Group, Ford, and GM, who has awarded billions of dollars to minority-owned firms since the late 1960s. So we look at this now as a MWBE growth area in the construction or the manufacturing of the buses and the rail cars and the subway cars that we buy, right? And so they've gone out and they've hired Sandra to come up with a creative solution as to how they can create a mentor program in the manufacturing of our most recent $1.8 billion rail car procurement, right? Also, we are working with the chamber now. For example, we buy Dell and HP products, right? Dell is located in Austin, Texas. It doesn't do us any good if we buy a box from Austin, Texas, right? And so we've been in constant conversation with Dell and HP about extending their special pricing to MWBE certified authorized resellers. Because when we buy that same box from a firm located in Buffalo or Syracuse or New York City, when they start to increase their market share, they're going to do two things. They're going to hire staff, and they're going to pay more taxes. And so it is imperative for us to do things more smarter, right? Buying a box from Austin, Texas do not do the state of New York any good. Buying a box from a firm in Manhattan, or state-certified MWBE firm in Manhattan or Buffalo or Rochester, does us a lot of good because they're going to be hiring people and they're going to be paying more taxes.
So let me ask this and then go to Karanja. And again, we're going to make this a very practical conversation. What do the MWBEs in this room and those that are following us on video and elsewhere need to do to get connected to these programs? They hear about these great opportunities. What practically needs to happen to get connected to these opportunities, and what's the timeline for them coming up as well?
They can reach out to my staff. To me personally, we are everywhere. We are out recruiting firms. We're helping them get certified. Once they're certified, we're bringing them back in. We're bringing each one of the MTA 6 different operating agencies there, and we're sort of kind of forcing them to market themselves, to find out when we're buying our goods and services and how they can be involved with that. And so we are everywhere. Our new $33 billion capital plan is going to be approved. And so therefore, we are going to have a lot of opportunities, both on our state-funded projects and on our federally funded projects as well.
Karanja.
Yeah, the one thing that Michael didn't talk about, which is because he's such a humble guy, is he didn't talk about why everybody else can't get like them. And I'll take that though.
You can do it. Go.
I will, because we're I'm a part of the group that oversees the entire statewide program, right? And people often, I think it's a great question actually, Michael, because people often ask that, and I think because from the outside you think of the state, it's all the state. But the truth of the matter is these agencies and authorities, they're almost like businesses themselves, and they have different capacity levels. The MTA is a slick, sophisticated organization. They have a robust revenue stream. They have all kinds of operations. They do a lot of construction. So they're able to put in the resources, and people like Michael and folks in his staff, they're skilled, they're committed, and you sort of can compare that to some of these smaller operations where you may have an MWBE person who is also, literally sweeping the walkway, up in the North Country. I mean, literally, I've talked to some people who they also sweep the walkway and they're MWBE specialists. So, you know, it can be difficult with respect to the different resources we have in our agencies to do all that we can do. And that's in front of the sort of internal will of people to do it, because we all know not everybody is in favor of these programs. And so you get some actors that are sort of notwithstanding the commitment of the governor, that sort of have maybe a more passive-aggressive tact, maybe not do as much as they should or could do. And so I think that really explains why you see the difference. So in our very large and built-out agencies and authorities, we do pretty well. You know, DASNY is another example. They do pretty well, committed and really competent staff. So at any rate, but we still strive to do better, that's for sure. And we're trying to get everybody up to that A standard. And I think we're doing a good job, but there's a lot more to do. Is a goal legally binding? Yes, it is. When you talk about goals, you have basically principally three different goals. You have a statewide goal, which comes out of the disparity study. You have agencies' individual goals that they sort of look out into their procurement on an annual basis and decide this is going to be our goal for all of our procurements for the year. And then you have the big dog of the goals, which is the contract goal. See, that's the big thing, because the contract goal is the piece that is forcing somebody to do something, right? When you have a contract goal, you're making a contractor do something they may not otherwise do, because you have this program that says that you have that it's appropriate to make them do something extra to remediate discrimination. The reason why it's legally binding is because you have this sophisticated mechanism through the state contract that makes it legally binding, meaning you have the goal, and it has to be a reasonable goal that's set on something that's logical and that's reflective of what's going on in the marketplace and what can be done. But you also have to have something that basically allows them to get away from the goal if that's reasonable too, via their good faith efforts, and that's the waiver process. That's why waivers are really critical. So when Michael's saying, well, you know, it's very difficult to get waivers, it's because they've done so much work to make sure that their goals are reasonable and that people can actually meet them. And so when somebody says, hey, we can't do this goal, he can say, well, did you do X, Y, and Z? Do you know about firm A, B, and C? And they'll say, oh, yeah, we do know about that. Well, then, okay, then your waiver is denied. So, yes, the goal is aspirational, but I think for a contractor, a prime contractor, if there is availability on that particular contract, it's functionally required for them to do it.
Can I dive a little bit deeper? And so, if you don't get to the 30% threshold, is there a penalty that occurs upon you?
It depends. So first of all, the 30% is the governor's goal. So what the governor says is, the governor has the whole board, right? He has the whole map. He's saying, look, when you take all these contracts and all the activity and all the work of the Michael Garners of the world, I want the procurements to be, 30% of the procurements to go to MWBEs, right? But that goal doesn't necessarily get applied to every single contract that way. The goal can be different on different contracts. So it's not about whether the contract itself always has 30. It's about whether when you add them all up, we get 30. Like right now, we're at 25%. The state
gets the 30%.
Right, exactly, the state. So right now, we're at 25%, for instance, right? Under the current regime, we had a 20% goal, and we exceeded that. So we're at 25% as a state. So if you had an instance where someone decided, like at ESD, we have 30% goals today on some of our contracts. If somebody comes into us and says, you know what, we're just not going to do it, and it happens, you know, particularly when you have this like, you know, we do a lot of grants at ESD. So it can be a little bit like in terms of when the grant is dispersed, whether they already spent the money and all that can get a little hairy. If you come to ESD and you didn't make your goal and you didn't show good faith efforts, there's going to be an enforcement of that contract. You better believe it. We're going to take money from you, or we're going to withhold money from our grant. So, yes, we're very serious about it in the state. There's a little bit of difference in the different agencies because the different agencies do different kind of work, which I was sort of talking about before. But yes, the goals are very serious. They're definitely binding, and from the perspective of the primes, they have to do it.
And so how do MWBEs and companies across the state gain access to these opportunities?
That's the big problem right there. Most of my career I was in the private sector, and I think you can set aside MWBE, just trying to do business with the state is like a near impossibility, because you have the prompt payment issues from the state, not to mention the prime themselves paying the MWBE. Like going on to we're trying to do better with the contract reporter and things like that, but it's like you almost have to have a full-time person looking for this stuff. One of the things that we're trying to do in the MWBE program is we're putting the onus on the prime to go out and find the MWBEs so that functionally the work comes to them, sort of, right? It's harder in the construction world because you might have multiple firms that can do the work. But like for instance, if there's like a website development, right? Our agency should be pushing that prime contractor to go out in the marketplace and see how can you get on this contract. So that's the way it's supposed to work. It's not perfect, and it's a challenge. It's something we have to continue to improve with outreach programs and education programs, and we do blast mailings about opportunities, and we do all kinds of stuff, but it's difficult. It's a challenge.
And before we go to Edward, just want to make sure we acknowledge that our Chief Diversity Officer for the state of New York is in the room, Mecca Santana. I'm sure Karanja's probably like, stop asking me all these hard questions. Go talk to Mecca right now. I'm just saying, no, we're just having some fun right now. I'm just saying, he's doing his thing. So Edward, the Rooney Rule. I mean, I think there's, how do we create the space where we're making it a point that MWBEs are part of the final conversation? What needs to be done to make that happen?
Okay. With respect to the Rooney Rule, the first thing we have to understand is that was something that was implemented in the private sector, concerning the National Football League and the owners of these teams. And, they implemented this rule to increase diversity in terms of, the coaches in the NFL. But, once again, we're talking about the private sector. When it comes to the public sector, it's a much more difficult conversation, and particularly because, starting with some of the cases that, came to the Supreme Court, namely Croson and others, the way these programs are judged is by the highest standard, which is a strict scrutiny standard. Reason being that when it came to the challenge of these minority women-owned business enterprise programs, the usual complaint is that this amounts to reverse discrimination. They're discriminating against these majority contractors. So with respect to the Rooney Rule, the conversation that took place some years back and has still been taking place lately is with respect more so to asset management and professional services, which is a touchy subject. I mean, we had the asset management strategy bill, which was passed in addition to the 2010 Business Diversification Act to increase, asset management contracts to minority financial firms. Some of these contracts coming out of the Common Retirement Fund. But I think even then, when that legislation was passed and then following its implementation, I don't think particular attention was paid in terms of the usurping of the controller's fiduciary role with respect to the Common Retirement Fund. And in order for us to ultimately implement some sort of Rooney Rule where, we decide that that out of three firms, after we interview a certain number of firms and set it up so that at least one of those firms are selected, it's gonna take a lot of conversation there. I'm not prepared, at this talk to necessarily, provide you a solution because, we really have to, if we do something like this, we have to make sure that it's constitutional and it's gonna withstand legal rigor. Not only that, there also has to be a conversation with labor as well in terms of these retirement systems and and get some participation and some and some feedback from labor in order for us to ultimately get the level of support we're going to need to even pass that type of legislation. I mean, I think it can legally be done. It's just though a matter of really sitting down, and the devil, of course, is always in the details in terms of implementing something like this. But certainly I think it can be done. But it's really a matter of bringing in all of the stakeholders, finding out the amount of will that's out there for something like that, and then eventually rolling up our sleeves and getting to work. But I think it can be done, but it will be difficult. It's not going to be anything that's going to be easy, especially because like I said, because of that scrutiny standard, somebody's going to challenge it, and you got to be able to legally defend it, and so I'll leave it at that.
And so to Ed Murphy, a challenge that gets brought up regularly is the perception that the labor movement is not being as willing to bring in communities of color into these opportunities, whether it be for training and apprenticeships across the board. So when we talk about the workforce development, especially in urban communities, a project comes in and the faces are not looking like the community when that happens. How do we create the immediacy of making that happen so that we're not just creating projects and creating MWBEs who are the contractors, but actually hiring folks from the communities that look like them as well?
Well, I'm going to step back for a second to Ed Pichardo's earlier comment about Dr. King. So the thing about Dr. King is he had a vision, and he played in a power game, and he brought a lot of people together to deal with that. And I think we have to have that sense of vision and power. Right now, what we're doing with Workforce Development Institute with the AFL-CI is we're doing a number of different things. We're fortunate we have 2.5 million members in New York State AFL-CI. We also have a vision for a different form of labor movement that is inclusive. And I use a three-legged stool as an example of the community, business, and labor to do that. So there's an issue that King was involved in, Gandhi was involved in, about conversion as much as power. That that Gandhi said, "I'm about liberating the British from their own prejudice and things like this." We have to do that within the labor movement and the community and break down those barriers. So I think that's essential to do that. But then there's got to be structures. Got to be structures that help. And I've talked to Michael about this, and I've talked about this in state government for about 10, 20 years. The issue I call a workforce impact statement. When Rachel Carson published the book about DDT, after that came the idea of an environmental impact statement. But every project has to happen. We need to have a community impact and a workforce impact analysis for every contract going out, whether it's the MTA buying subway cars and who are the people going to be there who works there, or any other project in New York City, and that public money going out. We need a rule that says there'll be a workforce impact that analyzes who's going to get those jobs, what the skills are, and how you're going to build those coalitions. And until you do that, in the request for proposals, the MTA, the state government, you can spend billions of dollars and there's going to be almost no effect, because you have to get a transparency about where the community fits into this, where the jobs are. Labor's job is also to protect the standards and the quality, but labor's failure has been that we have not been inclusive enough. We recognize that, and we are working on that. At the same time, there has to be people who are developed inside the various communities that can actually navigate their way through the system. I think, as you were saying, there's a book, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, some of you may or may have not read, by Paulo Freire, and the opening section, there's a quote: "The boss is the boss because he knows how things work." Unless you have people inside government and outside in the MWBE community who actually know how this works, and stop looking at the legislature alone to get things done. You've got agency heads that can help you, but you got to have people who actually know how policy, personnel, budget, and programs fit together, and where the administrative regulations are today, and how you navigate through that. You need partners on the inside, and you need people who can do that. Part of the challenges of MWBE and the way we function with it right now is we hire somebody, we make them a diversity officer, we make them this, but we don't give them the power inside government to actually decide what the RFP is going to say or what's going to happen and who's going to do it. There's issues of power, and I think we need to reduce this to a system, to a power game. Who's got the power to get it done? And do you have the people to do it? I happen to operate in a system that has 2.5 million members, and we're building partnerships with communities. We're building partnerships with the business community to do that. But without that power, it's not happening. All you're going to get is 30%. If you win, you're going to get 30%. And that's going to be it. When you got a demographic change that's happening in our country, and particularly in this state, that you really got to go look beyond that number of 10%, 20%, 30%. But that means you've got to have people who have the knowledge, the skills, and ability to get this done, and they're in the position to be able to make the decision about what's going to be hired for, not just people sitting in an office off to the side. I think, so the issue for me, reducing back to your initial question to me about workforce development, what works? Moving away from giving the money to the educational institutions so that they can train people for degrees that don't really matter for the jobs. The labor movement has a credentialing system through apprenticeships where the credential gets you a job anywhere. And one of the great things, if I'm happen to be editing an anthology now on work, and a labor guy from Utica mentioned something that we ought to look at. We look at the disparity between men and women in terms of pay. That does not exist in the building trades. A woman apprentice and a woman who is an electrician is paid the same amount as a male electrician. We have systems where you're paid because of the work you do, not by your gender or your race, and we need to get to that point.
All right. All right. There we go. And on that note, let's open it up. I know we've got a lot of different questions that are going to happen here, and we've got a good amount of time on this front. I'm gonna yield to our Chief Diversity Officer of the great state of New York to be the first. Mecca, please.
Thank you.
Give her a round of applause again. Absolutely. You know, there we go.
This is a question that actually is spurred on by a comment that Ed made, and it's part of the panel conversation that we had several weeks ago. And I'm interested in hearing the comments from the panelists and even from you, Mike. And it's about the fact that MWBEs were never meant to live in these programs. And it's getting them to evolve the thinking beyond just getting into the program and starting a business to thriving, supporting, growing a business, so much so that you grow out of the MWBE program, that the strategy for the business can't be to just survive on the MWBE program. And yet I found that we don't have enough MWBEs who are kind of embracing that entrepreneurial spirit to grow the business, so much so that then you have the cyclical effect of, we know MWBEs grow and then hire more people from local and diverse communities, which support those communities, which remedies all kind of other social ailments. So I'm just interested in hearing kind of your comments about getting people to embrace the idea of growing out of the program, using the supports and then growing beyond the program.
I'm gonna ask Mike.
So for the MTA, we are investing. Not only are we investing in infrastructure, we're investing in small businesses because we know that as the economy roars, small businesses are going to hire the people. And so we give our MWDBs an opportunity, give them all the resources that they need because we are investing in them because we want them to grow into large, viable businesses, right? Because sooner or later, somebody is going to question us. Out of all of the millions of dollars that you have invested into the MWDB community, what is our return on investment of taxpayers' monies? If we show that there's been the growth and development of these firms from A to Z, and now they're working as prime contractors and competing in the open market for us, we can go and say, well, they've won X amount of contracts and created Y number of jobs, right? So it is an investment for us. In a very short period of time, we must show a return on investment. And let me also talk about this conversation that we are starting to hear right now about income inequality. And Mike and I was having a conversation about this at the earlier panel. Let us, government, focus on creating and developing opportunities for our certified WBEs so they can create businesses, enter the marketplace, win contracts, create jobs, and be in control of their own destiny.
Let's clap it up there. The moderator privilege to try to cause a little ruckus on the panel a little bit. Should there be a cap on the amount of time that a MWBE stays in some of these programs? I think you regularly are seeing that someone essentially is staying in the same space. We see often the whole small business threshold of 25 million, but a company really only has like 100,000. You can't really compete with someone who's at 25 million. Should we be in this space where there's a time cap on when they're able to stay in some of these programs, so that to part of Mecca's point, like, we can actually grow people out of these programs so they're not sitting there for a long period of time? Ed?
It's kind of easier as a white male to answer this question in a sense, because
Man, you better come with a real good answer when
and
you
I'll
start
tell
like
you
that
why.
right there.
I'll tell you why.
You at Somos right now, man.
Right, because I think that cap has been internal cap, not externally, mandated cap about how long somebody's going to be there. But I think your job is to not be the diversity officer in 10, 20 years. Your job is either to be the governor or the commissioner, and to diversify your skills. If you stay with your expertise in diversity, right? Without, while you're doing that, picking up the skills about the social services department or the parks or this or that, and diversifying that so that you're the contender for the commissioner's job somewhere, rather than you're the contender for the diversity officer for the federal government. I think that's what I think that has. How do we grow diversity officers and MWE people to have the diverse skills to go off and become the powers who actually run IBM or run some other corporation? I think that's an internal development issue. And I think the other one, I go back to something I said earlier. We have to have people who are growing minority businesses and women businesses and mentoring them to get to the next level. And we can't be saying we did enough because we got somebody to start a business. They need the coaching. We need the coaching to do things. I've spent time working overseas in Southeast Asia and international business. You got to have people to learn about letters of credit. You got to have people who learn about things we never imagined about, and that's the piece. So we need to develop the human resources internally, and we need to get people past those positions, and I think we need to have structures that don't say Michael's going to stay as the MWE person be at MTA. He's going off to run the following after a certain thing. Why I say that, it's because, I think we need to develop our own people to do that.
And I'm going to jump to the next question because, obviously there are others, but one thing I think is important that we leave from these conferences, because we have these conferences and then it seems like nothing happens sometimes, is you working with those of us that are in office and those of us that can help shape policy so that we can create policies to achieve that goal, right? We shouldn't be in the space where we're just sitting in the same space where those same MWBEs are getting the same opportunities. I'm going to switch over to this side, please. Just say your name and before your question.
Said that if you did not make $100 million last year, you need not apply. Now, I translated that language from how it was written. And so there's a lot of things I was
So I just want to make sure we're being clear on the question. Is the question for the company that has exceeded that 200,000 scale? Like, we just want to make sure we're being.
We can start with the diversity amount, which is under the 200,000, because as a MBE in progress, I know that I have to become more of a sub than a prime, and so let's start with the 200.
Understood. And then before, it looks like Karan's going to do that, I just want to acknowledge the Honorable Adolfo Carrion has joined us, making an acknowledgement as well on that. Karanja?
Yeah, I know that people have questions, so quickly. So you're talking about the discretionary purchasing authority of the different agencies and authorities, that they can limit the. This is I was, I don't want to just keep talking, but you talk about the Rooney Rule. We have a rule. It's sort of better than the Rooney Rule in that you can actually limit the RFP, the pool of bidders, just to certified MWBEs. Again, that's been on the books for a long time, but now the Cuomo administration is implementing it throughout our agencies and authorities. So,
What's the name of that rule?
well, it's generally referred to as discretionary purchasing limits. So it just allows agencies to go through an informal bidding process, a less formalized bidding process than they normally have to try and allow MWBEs to be primes. That's on what are relatively small purchasing. For the state of New York, under $200,000, although it's a lot of money to an MWBE, which is great, it's a small purchase. So they have the agencies and authorities have that ability to do that when they can identify that. So I think that's what you're talking about. With respect to the NAICS code issue, I'm not clear what you're talking about. If that really is going on, you need to come talk to me after here, because that shouldn't be occurring. And then the other things you're talking about is, again, we know that it's hard to do business with the state. I hear you. I've been there. I understand what you're saying. I think that you're in an area of tremendous opportunity. So, like I said, I encourage you to come talk to me, talk to Mecca, and we can hopefully assist you in that way.
Before going to the next question, I want to acknowledge, I see Councilman Donovan Richards is in the room. Councilman, good to see you. There were other hands, please.
My name is Victor Alisea. We're a small business of a different kind. We're a college, small, private, liberal arts college.
What district is your college in? What district is your?
The district, he wants me to tell him because we're in his district.
Okay, there we go.
We're in the Bronx, we're also in Manhattan, and we're also in Brooklyn. And one of the things about this college is it's the only private, not-for-profit minority college in New York State. So when I go to Counsel Independent Colleges and Universities meetings, we're the only one of this kind. Now, we're a small college. And I say small because when you talk about colleges in New York City, especially, you talk about these monsters that are very both the publics and the privates. But when you compare us with other colleges in New York State, we're actually a mid-sized college at 1,200 students. 80% of our students are female, head of household. We're an adult college. 18% of our students are African Americans from 11 different Hispanic nationalities. So it's a multicultural college. And I've asked this question before because in the small business environment, if you're a not-for-profit, you can't participate. And yet, we are a business. We have a revenue, we have an expense, we have budgets, we have payroll, and as you know, our college is an economic engine into any neighborhood that it exists. So we're an economic engine in Williamsburg, Greenpoint, in Brooklyn, in Upper Manhattan, you already know who we are, and in the Bronx, where we just built a new campus and we're beginning to become an economic engine. So the question then is, how do we participate in this kind of enterprise that we're talking about? So it says I'm laying out an instrument here of a small business of a kind that if you put your heads together and you have a lot of expertise, tell us how we could benefit from the kind of resources that you're talking about, because when you talk about business, you're talking about big for-profit businesses. Now, when you do your training, a lot of times you go to the big universities, big public universities, because I think it lends some kind of reputation, and I understand all of that. But how does a small college like ours, that generates this economic impact in all its communities, which is a minority college, take advantage of these kinds of resources that you're talking about, when we are not the problem?
So we had a conversation, I guess, at the Nick Lugo conference, and I thought that we can talk about creating a program or a walk-in resource center, getting government funding from the city of New York, the state of New York, and the feds maybe, where businesses and students who own businesses can walk in. You can help them get certified and then lead them to specific contract opportunities at some of the city and state agencies. And if there has to be an access to capital, bring in a financing partner or a bank. If there's surety bonding assistance, you can bring in someone there as well. To have a program which is almost like a not one size fit all, but a full access program that I can walk into, I can get help in getting certified, and then get help in leading to contract opportunities, get help with access to bonding, access to capital, right? And when my company starts to win contracts, I'm creating jobs. And your college is almost like a one-stop resource center. And you're headquartered in those areas, the South Bronx, Washington Heights, in Brooklyn, where firms need assistance in accessing government contracts and other kind of resources. I think that you're a perfect fit for a program like that.
Please.
Good afternoon. I'm in the healthcare business, and I met Michael yesterday at Assemblyman-Elect, and we were talking about the imminent, almost eureka growth in the workforce that's going to be necessary for frontline healthcare workers, but in IT, to support the development of this transformation in healthcare. We have a 5-year span of time to get this is done. And it seems to me that there is a need for a great deal of effort to think and talk about. I'm almost feeling like this conversation is getting me there, where you have a university as well as you have business development individuals who can help drive that. And in the community of all places, where young people really need to get developed or redeveloped, begin to do this work, and the technology entities who will be brought in to be able to assist even the healthcare industry meet the demand. The community, CBOs, and hospitals and healthcare industries working together to benefit communities and produce very good outcomes in healthcare. This is like huge, and I'm feeling that, we're still in the caves on this. You've done all this work. You've done all this work, but it's almost like I don't see it. And I know that the healthcare industry itself has had MWBEs 1, 2, and I believe 3, but everyone developed their own systems independently. Now there has to be a platform in each community where there's some sync. So I'm feeling that this is a golden opportunity for youth, young people coming out, still in universities, building a curriculum in institutions to help get this goal to be achieved. Lots of money.
It sounds like
Federal government.
on the federal level and the state level, municipal, et cetera. Right now I'm going to welcome more questions, but I'm going to throw something out there that could be maybe a collective exercise for each of us in this ordeal. This sounds like a perfect opportunity for us to figure out a scenario and a system on what's going to be our continual training system and training and development opportunity system in that manner, from the workforce component to the companies and getting them actually ready. We are too often, and it's kind of frustrating, honestly, we're still having conversations where folks are trying to figure out where to go for help. We have the opportunities clearly. We see the opportunity that's coming forth. Obviously, health IT is a game-changing opportunity for our communities that we need to be cognizant of, and we are just not preparing ourselves in that manner. So, maybe, Victor and others, we can talk through, Puerto Rico College and others, and we have 3 different boroughs represented here that we can obviously talk through the respective follow-up our teams can do on this front. Of going beyond just the one-time matchmaking session and making it a continual initiative and effort there. I saw several hands go up. Cynthia, I'm going to go to you first and then come on over.
Okay. My name is Cynthia Cox. I am the distributor. Mr. Blake here. I just want to say to you guys, what I do is I'm in networking. I'm an entrepreneur, so it's not the traditional way you get money. It's just like I have to share with, I want to make sure our community, since they said the 79 is the most, unprivileged borough of the district, but I want to share with people how they can help themselves. And, with you guys doing money, with that, like a company's called Ice International, how would you really work with that if I needed to get money, or just, how would it really work? It's a networking company. It's called networking, not working, but networking. So how would that really work with what you guys are talking about?
You're essentially asking how do entrepreneurs get access to resources, essentially is the question, right?
At the MTA, it needs to be either construction or transportation focus that we help emerging businesses to get into the mainstream.
Yeah.
I want to circle back to the healthcare question for a second.
Well, I'm just going to do if we don't mind, you keep going with the answer. We will all provide our contact information when we end this session, so that follow-up can occur and how we can sustain this. And I want to make sure we have practical next steps on some of the things we've talked through. Please.
If you look at healthcare and education, those are 2 of the biggest drivers of the economy right now. If you look at a lot of the Rust Belt cities, the city of Pittsburgh has reinvented itself from manufacturing into a healthcare hub. If you look at the governor and the Buffalo billion that he's invested in the city of Buffalo, if you go downtown the city of Buffalo, the mayor and SUNY there are moving the medical college from the Amherst campus to downtown Buffalo, where they are moving and building a new campus. And what that's doing basically is driving a lot of economic development as we currently speak right now. So lofts are being built, restaurants are being built, new townhouses are being built, because both the governor and the mayor of the city of Buffalo is focusing on bringing life to downtown Buffalo by taking the medical school from the University of Buffalo at Amherst and moving that downtown, because they both see and know that healthcare is one of the leading drivers in the economy as we currently speak right now.
Just for sake of time, I saw a few other hands go up, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Julia Torrance. I am a MWBE, New York City, New York State. And I have a real estate company, Karanja Real Estate. I find that there seems to be some disconnect between the monies that are given to certain nonprofit organizations that are looking for properties. There's more opportunity if you were an appraiser or an architect. But when it comes to real estate brokers, it's just like it doesn't exist. I've seen very few RFPs or RFBs come out for brokers. When I started this, they said it was a waste of time for me to do it as far as a real estate company is concerned. But I also know that there is opportunities for me, but they're just not listed. You've given Edwin Gould maybe $2 million to find 2 pieces of property, but they just go out there and just find anybody that they can, not looking within the MWBE, but they're looking under the MWBE as far as the appraiser is concerned, or another entity or architect is concerned. And I would like to know, why is that happening?
I can tell you why. Because generally speaking, the state is driven by by what the lion's share of the contract is for in terms of what they're looking for MWBEs. So you're right. You're caught in that. You're caught in a bit of an issue that the state doesn't perceive the real estate brokering to be something that they're going to get high utilization numbers on because it's a piece of a percentage of another number. So like at ESD, for instance, if we grant to a project and like you said, someone has to go out and find a site for it, that might be 1% of the value of our grant. So that we're getting MWB utilization of 1%. So the person inside of ESD they're not driven to go and look for you. With that said, why don't get my information, because we do that kind of work at ESD, and I would encourage you, what you should do is, for agencies like HCR, ESD, that do the granting, that deal with property and things like you should try and get to know the folks in those real estate groups, let them know you, and I think you'll find that some of those opportunities may come to your doorstep.
Before we go to the next hand, let me, just for a sake of efficiency and also for us to stay connected, I know your hand was up also. I'm going to come here in a second. If for follow-up, I think there's clearly an energy for us to continue this MWBE conversation after today. Let me give you an email and would encourage you to, why don't you send an email to this email address, and our team will gladly take on sustaining this conversation thereafter. Just send it to John, John, 79 District BX. We'll just make it easy for everybody. John 79 District BX at gmail.com. John 79 District BX at gmail.com. Just put in the subject line MWBE forum, and we'll use that as a way to keep folks engaged from this conversation. So again, John79 at districtbx at gmail.com, and just put MWBE forum in the subject line so we can keep everyone going in that way. I'm going to go to the back and then come up front.
Yes. Good afternoon. My name is Juan. I'm the Director of Political Action and Legislation for DC 37. This is an educational question, and I don't know if there is any linkage with the Start of New York 10-year exemption for the startup of a business with opportunities for the establishment, growth, and development of MWBEs.
I'm going to do the, I'm going to answer this so that y'all don't have to answer this. I don't see the easy linkage for a lot of MWBs into Startup New York, given the size and scale and the type of industry one has to be in.
Yeah, I'm sorry to be dominating the mic, but Startup New York is an ESD program. They're separate, I can tell you that. And we can get into whether tax credit should have MWBE attached to it, but they don't. So I can answer that very clearly. They're separate.
And so therefore, is there any opportunity in terms of moving forward in exploration of this group to make that linkage so that we raise those numbers and move from up to prime?
Of essentially like a tax incentive system for MWBs, if you will?
As an establishment, to be established, developed, and then the growth to get beyond the 30%.
Well, when I said they're separate, what I should have, because I sort of interpreted your question as to like whether the recipient of the tax credit had MWB requirements. So I shouldn't have said it that way. If there is building on a SUNY campus pursuant to Startup New York, then it's going to have MWBE, because if you're building on a state campus, that construction will have MWBE goals. So actually, I'm glad you did a follow-up. So there is linkage there, but that already exists. So anytime you build on a state property, you're going to have MWBE. But the tax credit piece, or in that case, Startup is really more of a tax avoidance scheme. There's no MWBE on that dollar value. So, to the extent that there's a link now, it's just on improvements to whatever land on state property. So there actually is a linkage, I guess, in that way.
And I do think, and I made note of it, there is an opportunity for us to figure out how to create some sort of similar type of initiative and program in that manner.
Let me just make one quick comment. I think the question really points to a real dysfunction. I think we talk about MWBE as if it's economic development. It really should be part of economic development. What we look at it as just something that's a set aside. You know, when the real thing should be developing minority and women-owned businesses and growing them, not just complying with a goal to do that. So I think that Startup New York is basically, from my opinion, Startup New York's about helping the universities much more than it is the businesses. But that's an argument that people can have. But the real issue is if we keep looking for how we're going to just move some money to minority and women-owned businesses, rather than develop them to be autonomous, to really to play in the street and really, you know, compete for business. I think we need to step back to that sometime. The goal is really to get contracts to people so they practice, they build power, build business, and do that. But sometimes we have to go back to that again and again and say, it's not just completing a checklist, but building the power of minority businesses.
Right here.
Thank you. I'm going to decline from talking, but I decided not to do it because I see a great opportunity in this conversation. There are politicians over here, some of them are gone, but and there are people who really know what they're doing. And I see that there's been progress in history in the United States with Community Reinvestment Act as a law, with civil rights, and for example, other things like affirmative action, stuff like that. So I see that there was probably a law, I guess, that it have to be, that put together minority business activities that we're talking here. Maybe what we need is to reach out to politicians that can change a little bit the law and be able to expand it a little bit and understand diversification. You know, a diversified community have this and this and this particular benefits, and they are not met at the level that we are trying, that we would like to see, just because there is a little bit of new learning that had come through the years, that we know that we need to make some additional changes to the law, and maybe all we need to talk is maybe to the lady who knows what level, if she's the level of politician that we need to talk to. I just wanted to say that.
Absolutely. I think we can all agree that, yes, there's an incredible opportunity here and a space for us to actually take this further from this conversation in a tangible way. Does anyone specifically want to follow up on the comment?
I just want to say that the law is going to change in 2016, and it's going to be a monster year for MWBE. So
walk them through what specifically about the law is going to change.
Well, no, it's just that when the disparity, the cycle, the way it works is the disparity study comes out to show if there's discrimination in the marketplace. If there is discrimination, and I think there's a good likelihood that there will still be some discrimination in the marketplace, then you have to have a program to remediate that discrimination. And that's in the New York State context, that's Article 15A of the executive law. The law expires in 2016, and then a new law is going to come in. And because of the emphasis that MWBE has been given, because of the priority that the governor has made MWBE, it's going to be a huge year, 2016, for that law. And it's going to be a tremendous amount of lobbying and tremendous amount of conversations. Things like whether tax credit should be included, whether aid to municipalities should be included, whether things, whether not this, but like the MTA should be excluded. Those kinds of things are going to be on the table. And it's really important for our political leaders and our stakeholders to know that and to be ready for that.
So I think to your question and to the other comments that have been made, and then we're going to ask for a quick closing statements here. It sounds as which 2015 is a year where there are immediate opportunities that we can plug into that have been laid out. 2016 is the opportunity for institutional and structural major changes that could be incorporated across the board. So in terms of how we create this kind of game plan moving forward and making those connections, how we can do it in that way. So this is good.
Small comment to what he said.
Please.
I just want to say that before, beyond discrimination, which
Yeah.
has always been a difficult to deal with,
Yep.
even though there have been some, advancement,
Yeah.
I would say, the diversification, there was a panel, or a conference, that was about having board people of colors and all the kind of people in the board of corporations.
Yeah.
So it's easy to go in another way, which is if you have diversification of colors or ethnicity and other areas, you'll be able to have a better result in the mission objectives.
Absolutely.
And the bottom line of those corporations or companies, whatever.
Completely agree, and the Council of Urban Professionals is demonstrating that. Executive Leadership Council is demonstrating that. New America Alliance. No, businesses. These are business entities that are doing just that, exactly what you're laying out right now. For the interest of time, this has been phenomenal. Clearly, we have a lot of energy to sustain from here. We'll keep that going. Final comments, Ed? Any final comments?
I want to go back to training and mentoring, and I think, give an example, in the labor movement, we're going to be taking tradespeople, electricians, plumbers, and training them how to become contractors to develop their own businesses. I think things like that need to happen. I think that the state and city should be doing some sort of entrepreneurship training that stays with people and adopts them and mentors them, like the Service Corps of retired executives. There should be people out there who really retired who can help people do that. So I think that would be really useful. I think we should demand that the schools, if you're going to put all this money into the schools and they're going to be tax exempt, the schools should be providing training for minority and women business enterprises so they really can grow their businesses, not just give them money and contracts, which they should do. But I think we need to train people, not just look at handing out the money and the contracts, but help coach them, because if you it was said earlier, if you give somebody a contract and they fail, everybody turns against them and that. I think we need to walk alongside and coach minority and women businesses and enterprises and develop that and stick with them for 5-10 years. And foundations could be involved in this, the city could be involved in this, and you could take people who've run a business and help train people to run businesses.
Thank you, Ed. Edward?
Okay. I'd just like to maybe touch on a couple of points that came up here. I mean, when we're talking about information technology and the help field, for instance, I think you're probably referring to the recent report that came out by J.P. Morgan Chase in terms of the amount of individuals in, say, low-income communities or minorities who aren't adequately trained to take advantage of the many jobs and positions that are becoming available, and the unfortunate amount of time that it takes for many of these firms to find qualified individuals. And I know for sure that one of our clients, the Consortium for Workers Education, which is the New York City, say, counterpart to Workforce Development Institute in New York City, is at this time sitting down and talking about providing those training opportunities to be able to ready these individuals to take advantage of these jobs that are available in the workplace. I'd also like to say that the minority women-owned business enterprise area is something that's constantly evolving, and 2016 is definitely going to be a very exciting year, in terms of the disparity study coming out. But also, and I guess we could continue the conversation, but there were many changes this year, even with the adjustment of the personal net worth and providing the opportunity for certain firms that right now are, come above the personal net worth to make a direct application based on their field to be able to have that adjusted or waived. So I think that's an exciting event that occurred recently, and I believe, Karanja, the regulations are being put forth right now to crystallize that. So, you know, I look forward to continuing this conversation, and, you know, I'm excited.
Yeah, just quickly, I mean, I just want to thank everybody for coming, and I love doing this stuff. I can't do it forever. I won't be doing it forever, but it's great. You know, I just love hearing from people. Please come talk to me. Tell me your experiences. Tell us what we can do better. You know, we're working really, really hard at this, and we want to make it as good as it can possibly be. So just thanks for the input, and that's it.
Last but not finally, you know, there was a college basketball coach by the name of Al McGuire, and he said, when basketball is played right, it's like poetry in motion. And when the practitioners, when we recruit firms, they come in, they get certified, and we see them get contract opportunities. And when they start to create jobs and hire people, it's like poetry in motion. Case in point, we had a subway car contract. We rejected go waivers and go reductions. The manufacturer went out and found a DBE firm and awarded that DBE firm a $30 million subcontract. When government works the right way, we create opportunities, and it's like poetry in motion. This conversation is not a new one, it's a historical one. But I think that as we move forward, especially in 2016, when the whole paradigm is going to change, for those firms sitting in the seats like yours, the doors of opportunities are going to be open. And we look forward to not only working with ESD and the governor's office, we also look forward to working with the state senate and the state assembly as well. Thank you.
And so we'll close with this. I think we can all attest a phenomenal panel who clearly different perspectives, different awareness. We have a responsibility in the assembly to go and do the work now and be a part of this change and actually creating the landscape. I can't remember who said it yesterday, but they said it well, that the responsibility for those of us in the public sector is to create the foundation for success for the private sector to invest. And if we're doing that right, then we're really going to be winning. So would encourage you to grab everyone's cards. We're going to do it vice versa. Send the email to John, who's on my team, so we can follow up in that way. And everyone, safe travels back. Thank you, everyone.